to hurt or harm other people. What we're talking about here is transgender, transsexual people with gender recognition certificates or without being discriminated against because of how they look or how they sound. And what we're going to end up here is we'll be policing by perception. Are you female enough? Because who's going to do a genital inspection? How do you prove you're of a biological sex in these particular instances? So I don't think it actually solves the problem. It just creates more.
But the woman in question here has or had a right to go to the restroom without fearing someone who's dressed as a man would try and gain access to the cubicle, doesn't she?
In the same way I do as a woman. I have the right to go to the toilet, to do my business, go into a cubicle, lock the door. Everybody has the right to do their business in private. Nobody says otherwise.
Well, they do, don't they? Because, unfortunately, we know in some cases we've had men put in the female prison estate in Scotland.
Again, what we're saying here is transgender people, transsexual people are not women or not men, depending on whether they're transmasculine or transfeminine. What we're doing here is we're accusing transgender people of being of their birth assigned gender. And that is where the Gender Recognition Act and the Equality Act provide us, people like me, with the ability to carry on our lives unhindered. We're not, we're being conflated with predatory men. We're not predatory men. There are predatory men out there and they need to be stopped, but it's not transgender people.
Well, how are they to be stopped? So you go about your life not troubling anyone. If you choose to tell me how long you've been trans, you don't have to, but I would imagine possibly for a number of years. Do you not feel that in a way this is the problem by people who choose to call themselves trans and cause issues for folks such as yourself?
People will always do bad things if they want to. I don't see many instances of people saying they're trans just to access spaces. I mean, given the discrimination and the stigma of being trans, why would anyone say I'm trans?
Because it gets you into the female jail and not a male one.
Yeah, well, I can't speak in that case.
It gets you into a female ward and not a male ward.
Well, when I'm in hospital, I want to be treated with dignity and respect. I don't mind whether I'm in a private single room or whether I'm in an open room with other women. But don't put me in a room with men. I'm not equipped to be in a room with other men.
Yeah, okay, I hear you. But that's not quite the point I was making. Is that the predatory males have caused this issue for someone like yourself who just wants to get on with their life. Do you not see the point at which I'm driving?
Completely. I completely support the law needs to protect women and young people from predatory men. I completely support that. But trans people, transgender people, transsexual people are not predatory men.
No, so isn't that what this law is seeking to do, lastly?
If that's the intent of the law, then that is what we all want. But I think if you look at what Kemi, Rishi and other people are saying, it's not around that. They're trying to demonise transgender people, as they have done through the CAS report, through other initiatives, blocking access to puberty blockers. They're trying to erase transgender people.
Let me read to you from the article here. This is Kemi Badenoch. Clarification is required, not just to protect the privacy and dignity of women and girls, but also trans people who were going about their lives in peace until predators started exploiting loopholes in the law by calling themselves trans with no evidence beyond their self-identification. Surely that's wholly supportive of you.
What she said earlier in the interview with yourself was those people who identify as... I don't identify. I've been diagnosed as a transsexual woman under the current law. I'm not identifying, I am. And I think what we've got to try and do is avoid discriminating against transgender, transsexual people by perception. Right. And that's what's going to happen. Yeah. How do I prove that I'm trans enough to be allowed to exist in this law? Someone's going to walk up to me and say, Joanne, show me your genitals, show me your birth certificate, show me your passport, and can you do a chromosome test in front of me to prove who I am? How am I going to prove that I'm trans enough?
OK, Joanne Lockwood, thank you. I think the government would argue that it's rather those who are abusing it, people who, well, use that language again, exploiting loopholes by calling themselves trans. I would argue that's probably Ms. Badenoch would say that's who she's seeking to tackle. Joanne Lockwood is founder and CEO of See Change Happen. Listening to Helen Joyce, who's Director of Advocacy for Sex Matters, and wrote Trans, Where Ideology Meets Reality. Is this getting a dose of reality into the debate, in your view, what the Conservatives are talking about? Good morning.
Good morning. And yes, that was an incredibly frustrating listen from Joanne, because it always we immediately start to centre people who do not identify as their sex, instead of remembering the vast majority of people, in particular women, who do recognise their biological sex and do need single-sex spaces. The Equality Act isn't the who gets to go into which toilets act. It's the anti-discrimination law. And one of the largest groups that is discriminated against is women. And in order for us to live in public safely, we need single-sex spaces. And straight away we move from that to talking about men who identify as women and what they need. I'm here to talk about what women need. And what women need is single-sex spaces that are clear, really, really clear.
And how... Explain more on that clarity, if you would.
Sure. So the Equality Act rolls together lots of different laws. In particular, it rolls in the Sex Discrimination Act, which is about 40 years old, and 50 years old even at this point. And when that was written, there was no question. A man who identified as a woman was not a woman. You can't identify as a member of the opposite sex. It's not a thing we can do. We're mammals. You can say you feel like that, or that you have a condition like gender dysphoria. But, we actually are sexed beings. We're conceived male and female. We're born male and female. We stay that right through our lives. And women know that being female creates vulnerabilities, also, of course, opportunities. There's nothing wrong with it. We have to go back to where we were, that men don't even try to come into our spaces because they understand that those spaces are for women only.
So what of Joanne Lockwood when Joanne Lockwood says, are you asking me to sort of prove my sex, prove my gender every time I want to go to the restroom?
I'm not really very interested in gender or gender identity. I'm interested in sex, which is something that we all have. Everybody knows their sex.
Well, we can't.
And if somebody is male, they shouldn't be coming into female spaces. It shouldn't even be asked.
But she's not. She's a trans woman, so she's...
But she is male. She is male. Nobody changes sex. It's definitional. A trans woman is male. You can't be a trans woman without being male.
I mean, I didn't ask Joanne Lockwood, but let's assume that she's had all the surgery, and I assume, again, she dresses as a woman. She wants to go to the ladies' lavatory, obviously.
No, not obviously.
Well, where's
a male
she meant to
person
go?
Shouldn't come into... There should be third spaces for people who aren't comfortable using the spaces for their own sex.
Have you been...
No, not for goodness sake. How am I to check whether somebody's had surgery? And anyway, surgery isn't a condition for a gender recognition certificate.
A little pub in the country that's been trading since the 1300s. You want it now to find a third toilet. Just let Joanne Lockwood go to the ladies' room. She's dressed as a woman. She's had all the surgery. I'm sorry, if you're listening, by the way, Joanne Lockwood, I apologise. I'm assuming you've had the surgery. Go on, sorry. Go on.
The surgery is not a condition for a gender recognition certificate. It's irrelevant, and women can't ask men if they've been castrated. This is not something we can do.
I'm grateful for your input. Helen Joyce is that Director of Advocacy for Sex Matters. I will come straight to your calls after this.